Now recording, share my screen so I can play my little ditty. I was going to tell you over when I think that. Never mind. Harold Burgmayer, welcome to the collective. Thank you so much for joining in this very weird stunt that we're doing here.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. It's great.
You're currently Bandmaster of Chicago staff band, a wonderful group of instrumentalists, but I'm interested in the composing side of young Harold. So where did that come from? When did you first know that outside of the family piano and sing-song that people could and wanted to play something that you'd written down? Where did it start?
Actually, I grew up in a corps east of Philadelphia, a small corps east of Philadelphia, and about half the band was my family. My dad trained me. He was the YYP band leader, and I started making arrangements for that band when I was about 14, just transcriptions of vocal pieces and so forth.
Okay.
I enjoyed that. And of course, they got played, which is, that's part of the trick. I went to architecture school. From there, that's when I played in the New York staff band and completed my architecture degree. But during that time, I started to actively it's kind of like I'm sitting in the New York staff band rehearsal hearing things that I've never experienced.
Mm-hmm.
I had some albums growing up, but really experiencing it kind of in the room kind of set me in motion that I'd like to try to write some things. So that's when I started, was kind of turning my college years, and when I was studying architecture of all things, not music, but anyway.
Yeah, I mean, some of these, people just don't start out and they find that they're doodling and they don't even realise that what counterpoint and harmonisation is. And then you learn later, oh, is that what that's called? Well, I can do that. I didn't know that was an official title. So I'm guessing. I mean, I only know what I read in books and see on YouTube when you're dancing about in front of the Chicago staff band, raising the congregation up. Is it always a pen and paper job, or is it a case of note it down when you're out walking the dogs, get home, and then enter it into finale, Sibelius, whatever takes your fancy? How does the thing begin?
I usually begin with something I want to say, or an idea, or a title. And it gets worked on my walks. I do walk or bike every day. And usually, actually, when I walk away, I figure it out. When I'm working really hard at my desk or the piano, then it kind of works out. But yeah, that's kind of how it is. Now, in this job, well, actually, in Philadelphia, too, often I'm writing something for an occasion or a song we need or something, But yeah. But the best ideas come on those walks, when I'm out. And basically, I just try to capture as quickly as I can. I have a couple notebooks. I keep notes and kind of ideas and even titles or thoughts. And I just keep kind of the trail of my history of the last few years are in that book. So, yeah.
Is your mobile full of voice memos with you tweeting or whistling a tune?
I've only done that a few times, but I have done it. I confess I have done that. Yeah.
It seems to be a very common thing. Other than waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and just sort of scratching it. That's what it was.
Right.
But obviously, as you say, since you were 14 years old, you were composing and putting notes down and manipulating things that people were finding interesting. And to be honest, I was really pleasantly surprised when I looked at your Salvation, your brass Salvation Army publications. I'm very much aware that the order of publication is not necessarily the order they were written in. So you've got pieces that were written many, many years before they even saw the light of a publisher's printer. But you go from, I think, Prelude on St. Francis in 1985, right through to one of your most recent, Spirit of God Descend, an arrangement of. So is there a kind of a genre that you particularly enjoy doing, or is it just a challenge of whatever comes next?
Be a little of both, but I have not a weakness. I really enjoy writing devotional music. So you'll see on that list, Abide With Me, 'Tis So Sweet, Spirit of God Descend. And there are a number that haven't been published that I think are quite good, but, sometimes it's a matter of timing. So,
yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, I was looking at, you know, because I grew up with the unity, the Ashgrove and nativity scenes, Magnificent Fugue. I listened to Air and Dance earlier today, and I really was noticed that was quite different style of music. Because you didn't originate with a star band. So what was core life like for you I mean, you had a musical family, obviously, as you said, with your father and everything. But what, when you were a young man growing up, what was the local core music life?
So we had a small core band. Yeah, a small core, about 10 or 12, and we had several junior bands and beginners. Then I eventually went into the city, commuted to the Philadelphia Citadel Corps, which was a large core band, about 35 pieces. And that's where I heard and experienced, especially the lights and music, Goffin music, that devotional music, and some of those marches and so forth. And we'd play the Blue Book every Sunday night or that kind of stuff. Yeah. So you kind of learn music there. Then I went to New York and with the New York Temple Corps, totally different. It's a small, not a large congregation, but there were 5 commissioners in the audience because the national headquarters was there, plus the rest of us, So I enjoyed that core band. And then when I moved back to Philadelphia, I took leadership of the Philadelphia Citadel Band. It was a good band, and that's when I really learned how to stay in front of a band and conduct. So I learned a lot of repertoire during that time. And, I was very young, in my 20s, so the older guys this is how these pieces go, and all that kind of thing. But at the same time, I was very anxious. At the same time that Bill Heinz and Jim Curnow and Bruce Broughton, people like that, Steve Bullard, were writing their first pieces, and that became interesting too. And so I confessed, I showed Bill once, I would reduce those pieces to piano scores, because I was playing New York Step Band. I could get the manuscript. They weren't even published yet. And I wanted to know how they made those sounds harmonically, what was going on. Of course, it was a rich harmonic language that was unfamiliar up until then, basically.
Yeah. So when you were sort of developing your talent as a young man, and you were finding, you'd had your pieces put on the stands of the band, and they thought, oh, Harold, this is good, mate. Can we have some more of this? Who were the sort of the people that you looked to for inspiration, and the people that inspired you and helped to hone and develop your talent?
So Ivor Bosenko, most people don't know this. Ivor Bosenko immigrated to the States to be the divisional music director in Philadelphia. I often tell people that he wrote his best music in Philadelphia, even though he had 30 years in the West after that. But I'll go on the strength of the Lord, those kind of things, they happened in Philadelphia. And so he was very nurturing. At first, I had never experienced anything like his songwriting and his vocal music, and I really aspired to do that. And I continue to aspire to do that, actually. But then he gave me opportunity, and actually he was the first one who sent music, for instance, to Race to Van Allen to look at, that kind of thing. Next would be Robert Redhead. He would come to Ladore, which is our camp, Eastern Pennsylvania, every year to do basically the vacation, but he would do the band during the week, and I kept passing him pieces. So the first piece was A Sweet Steadfast and Sure. The last movement was We Have an Anchor, which was published by itself. He recorded
you preempted my question on that.
Yeah. So he was in the van. He was in the van. I said, I want you to look at this piece. Maybe you want to use it. He says, this is good. I'll use it. Next thing you know, I got a record in the mail in November, like just a few months later, that they had recorded at their Gospel Song Festival. So do you know about the Sweet Steadfast and Sure?
Yeah, I've got the Sweet Steadfast. It's one of my favorite to listen to when I've got a headache. And that's not detriment. Because I think I heard there was a recording of it, and we have an anchor to finish with, if I remember my things. And I heard that as a single movement, and Craig Lewis told me, I think it was Craig Lewis, he said, yeah, that's part of an entire suite. They've just published the last section. And I went back, and wow, I mean, the colour, the movements, the imagery in that piece is just incredible. I thought, who is this guy? Because, it's just like, it's just a wonderful kind of musical journey. And, it's got that wonderful, I call the American flamboyance. It's kind of, you get the horns on the highways in the American drama series. It felt a bit like, come on, we've got a message to tell. So Steadfast, I mean, I know it ended up as We Have an Anchor, but how did you do that? Where did the idea for that come from?
Actually, we used to have most of the core band play Sunday night meetings in the days we had Sunday night meetings. And I decided I would do this suite, and basically we're going to play one movement a week. And then when we got to the concert, we'd have suite.
Yeah.
But basically, I was really attracted to what we call American gospel song, which is a verse and chorus. So that would be this one thing I know. Now I Belong to Jesus by Norman Clayton, and then we have an anchor. So that was basically what happened with that. Now I'll let you in a little secret that I have just created a new third movement.
A new third movement. Oh,
I decided that Craig Lewis asked me for his band in Toronto, the retired band. I forget the name of it. I think it's Heritage Brass.
Yeah.
If I had ever typeset Step Fast and Short, because they love it, because they played it in the Canadian Step Band, a lot of them recorded it, played it a lot. And I said, well, I haven't done that. So I got the first two movements. I decided to create a movement that matched the form, the shape of We Have an Anchor. So I've used When We All Get to Heaven, and I just finished that during that credit at the start of this pandemic. I kind of said, well, let's try this for fun. So I basically had the We Have an Anchor score next to me at the piano, and I was basically kind of follow the shape and kind of the harmonic action. So I think it's possibly as exciting. I don't know. We'll see. But I have no one to play it right now, so it's just sitting there. I haven't kind of finished it off yet.
Is a piano a natural instrument for you, or is it just something that you can use as a functional tool to work out? Because there are some composers who they can play, but put them in front of an audience or a congregation. No, they couldn't do that. But they can use it to work out their own musical progression, if you like.
Yes, I'm pretty reliant on the piano. I mean, I've tried to develop my ears over the years. And even with the computer, well, first of all, I'm one of those composers who actually worked in ink. Mm-hmm. And when you committed to notes, to ink on a score, you were committing to that. And that kind of decision making was important. So you kind of had to work things through. Now it's so easy to erase with pencil or, make the corrections in the computer and make changes. Mm-hmm. So the decision making about what note should be what or what harmony should be what, learned that a long time ago. But I've kind of go back and forth. I actually sometimes work at the piano and then go into the computer. I used to sketch across the middle, start to orchestrate it. And actually sometimes I learned this from Eric Leitzen. He talks about in his color and texture book, his harmony arranging for band book, how we used to have to make the 3-line reductions for scores. They didn't print full scores. The Salvation Army did, but the outside bands didn't. And when he would do that process, it became like a way to check and change and edit further. So I've started doing things where like something feels a little muddy to me in the score. I'll go back and make a piano reduction, go back to the piano. And something about working that through with my hands is helpful and clarifying. So that's part of my process.
Yeah. How does it help when obviously the computer can make everything sound perfect, but nothing beats the experience of having the music on the stands and the cornet players playing, and you get that sort of immediate kind of, that works well on the computer, but it doesn't work well in real life, and it enables you to tweak. How does that experience help you as a composer and an arranger?
Let me tell you a little story. Recently, we started Central Territory Staff Songsters, and I decided I would do something for them. And it was a 2-verse version of Repton, and pretty simple 8-part arrangement, a cappella. And we got in the rehearsal, the first reading, and I said, ladies and gentlemen, I need you to know that sounded a whole lot better than the computer. The computer doesn't always give you the real picture. And for me, some dissonances, seconds, and so forth are so much brighter, they're not accurate, and the pitch almost is too accurate. So it's something wrong about it. So I'm not trying to write to make the computer sound good. I'm trying to imagine really what's on that paper. And so when I do go to the band, I'm fortunate because I can go to the staff band, or in this case, the staff songsters, and sing it, and I'll come back. And they all know there's going to be another version. Yeah. They all know that. Yeah. They're always, sometimes 2, 3, 4 versions. Mm-hmm. Till finally, when I felt live that things work. And of course, I'm very fortunate. Bill Heinz, really trained the Chicago Staff Band to really hear very well. So whenever we're proofing or reading pieces, there's always feedback from the band. It's just very natural. It happens. It's very helpful and instructive. And a couple of people, like Peggy Thomas, for instance, is just so intuitive. She'll say, I think you should do this or this a little longer. So I have that process. I'm fortunate to have that process at this point. Not during this pandemic, but on a normal Tuesday night, I can get feedback pretty much right away on something I've done. So.
I'm trying to think, because something else has popped out. I'm trying to scan the list because you just reminded me of a title, and I have no idea whether it's one of yours or Heartfire, a lovely little march. It may not be, but it says, I find sometimes you get these wonderful pieces of music that the tune is right at the center of. As a composer, one of my questions I was given was, you're walking through the park and the tune comes into your brain, or a band approaches you and says, look, we want a hymn tune arrangement of, how does the Burgmayer approach to making that original and to keep the essence of the tune different from the Heinz Kerno RSA versions that are already out there? How do you maintain the originality of a hymn tune arrangement?
First of all, I'm trying to, the integrity of that melody is really important. And so, first of all, even as a bandmaster, you're sitting in my rehearsal, I never want to lose the tune. I want to know that it's there. And it's pretty clear. And then I'm usually trying to use bits of the tune to surround the music with or build up to. So rather than, I know this is a little old school and there's some fine pieces that do this well, but an episode and then the tune and another episode, I feel it should be more integrated. And so we work motivically or whatever, things about the tune. Then there's also things in the words. I'm a big words guy, in the words that could suggest phrases, you know, that you could highlight in the music to kind of protect the tune. So yeah, I embrace the tune and it's important to me. And so pieces like, I think Abide With Me, my arrangement Abide With Me is because I really know the story of this song. Mm-hmm. And the whole idea that he was on his, you know, tuberculosis and he was dying.
American.
Yeah. Right. So, so I painted pictures of, you know, he saw a vision across the water. He preached his last sermon, Henry Light, and he preached last sermon, went down to the waterfront. They're going to send him to Lower France or something, you know, but his TB, but he never makes it. But he has a vision across the water. And if you look at the last verse of the song, the glare of the light across the water, he sees a cross, which is like the last rites cross in front of, hold thou that cross before my eyes, you know, those words. Well, you got to paint that picture. And I feel, you know, in that case, that's why I think the piece is successful, because I do paint the picture kind of the lyrics in that hymn. So
yeah, it's interesting. I do wonder though, I mean, I asked some of the composers, you have a very particular situation, because in your events and your festivals and when you're taking part as a band, not necessarily doing the concert as the Chicago staff band or as a Philadelphia band, the case of, okay, we're going to be doing this piece and we're going to have all the glitzy overheads that we can, which means that as a composer, you can go in and you can write Little David, you can write Mountain Climbers, Thine is the Glory, knowing that the impact that you want from the words is going to be on screen at your click and command. Does that intrude on your thinking when you're doing these compositions, that, hey, I know that I want to include the words and the music and the tune and the importance of it, but we're going to have an all-star, we're going to be doing this in, I don't know, Carnegie Hall or something, and everything's going to be on the screen and they're going to get the words and the poems and the text. Does that have an effect on you when you're writing some of these pieces?
No.
Okay, right, next question.
No, but I want to say that, but I'm expecting it's going to happen these days. And I think it's important to our ministry that I understand, especially, I don't, you know, say the Chicago Staff Band, I want to travel to a town and I've never been to Boone, Iowa, let's say. I don't know what they know, and they certainly might not know a Salvation Army song or a chorus. So to make sure that they are informed, we do project the lyrics, and we spend a lot of time making it nice and making it expressive, sometimes adding scripture. But I'm not writing thinking, well, I'm going to use, I mean, occasionally I have my piece Hemispheres, which was by the New York Staff Band.
That's a big elephant in the room. I've got to ask you, but that
was designed for the visual component, because obviously we wanted to show, I think I quoted 80 places in the piece so that they could show pictures from all these 80 places. So that would be one example of one that's done. Occasionally I've been asked for congresses to do pieces that I know there's going to be a visual component, and I'm working with the visual artists sometimes.
Yeah. I do find it interesting that you go back and you read the biographies of people like Eric Lightson and Eric Ball and George Marshall, who you would go into a very plain room and it would just be the band, and unless the congregation knew the old wells or the songs to music, Joe Bloggs would come in and he wouldn't have a clue, right, unless it was Abide With Me or Amazing Grace or some familiar church hymn.
Right.
Whereas, and even now in the army, we have so many people of different generations who come in and say, I don't know that chorus. And I know particularly, I don't know whether it's the same where you come from, but in the UK, in my home corps of Woodbridge, I can go 7 miles down the road to Stowmarket and they'll be singing a chorus I've never heard of. And I could turn around and doing this. one of my favorite Easter choruses is He's alive, He's alive, He's alive forevermore. Jesus has risen from the dead. I sang that at Ipswich Citadel, which is 10 miles down the road. They'd never heard of it. And yet most of the corps grew up together because we had divisional arrangements. And yet, so it must be very important as a composer, and also it's about when you're putting pieces together, that there's a linking fact. So my next question is, when you're composing, how do you empty the mental palette? That we're so exposed to Spotify and YouTube and music at the mall and on the TV and the ringtones and everything. When you've got to clean the palette and do a hymn tune arrangement or a suite, how do you try not to keep the brain empty so you're focusing on what you need to focus on? What's the process for you?
I'm trying to identify with what the piece is becoming in my mind. I call it listening. I'm listening for what, in a lot of ways. I'm listening for voices to lead, so that leads me to harmonies. I'm listening for the story. Is there a story across this piece? So I'm staying focused on that. And that means that sometimes that I shouldn't divert to a harmonic language that might be nice in itself, but it differs away from the kind of path that the music is taking. So there are pieces where and I think I'm skilled at this. I can live in a more harmonic language that might sound like someone, but if it's consistent, then it becomes mine, right? In other words, because it's not that there's new harmonic language so much that we're using in the Army, but that I can take that on. And so if I violate it, for instance, one of the rules, for many years is to avoid a dominant seventh chord makes things sound new. That's not a new idea. But as soon as you start to apply that, then it becomes old-fashioned. Then you were out of the style of where the piece was going harmonically. So I try to stay consistent with that. So my ears, yes, would be full, although I don't listen to much brass band music. I mean, recently, I guess, because of contests, I do a little more of that kind of conducting now, but more listening to orchestral music and how that works. And so that's kind of where I'd like to take it go. And I think it was in Les Condon I learned that we have to, in the Salvation, we have to be so succinct. We have to say what somebody would say in 20 minutes with an orchestra in 6. Mm-hmm. And so we have to learn to be very succinct, get our message across, You're
about the next person to mention that I was on the phone to his daughter Dot earlier today, talking about these conversations, and I said, look, it doesn't matter what the age or the range of the composer is. Les Condon keeps getting mentioned. I never met him. I was only 4 years old when he passed away, but I know his daughter Dot is a very good friend of mine. And I said all these people in America and New Zealand just echo his name as just a genius of the trade, where I would have thought the Jim Kerners, the Eric Leitzens, the Eric Bulls, the Ray and the Ken Downeys, it's a wide mixture. I think in the Salvation Army, we're really blessed to have a wide scale of wonderful composers that we can call on.
Yeah.
And one thing I'd like to ask you, because you fall into this category, not many composers who don't, is you've got a lot of Christmas arrangements. Now, Christmas can be it can be what I call the Marmitey thing. You either like it or you don't. You're spending every weekend in the mall, on the street corners, playing the Christmas carolers, and then you've got the big Christmas festival, and you've got to pump out 3 Welsh ministers, 2 native scenes. What was the other one I saw? Silent Night. Bearing in mind that for most people, unless they just hear the carol played, that's not going to be. How do you make the Christmas piece different and special while still retaining this monolith of Christmas music that we have thrown at us every year?
Well, there is something special about Christmas. And first of all, I look at it 2 ways. As someone who programs, I can pretty much play anything I want at Christmas. It's the only time of year you can pretty much play anything you want. And the other part is Christmas, this is a publisher side, Christmas sells. So the American Band Journal sells 4 pieces a year of Christmas music. You would think at first that's not a good investment when there's only another issue. However, it does sell. And so you can always sell Christmas music in the sense that's usable. So why is that? I think because we have this huge open field of what we can play, and people are interested. I'm going to say that then, of course, Christmas is like the first concert for young students in the year, and so we need something. And so that's the reasons why I would have done, and now our biggest concert, Chicago Stampede, is the weekend after Thanksgiving. It's the first weekend of Christmas. It is a some of it has to be Christmas. That's kind of the deal. So we're kind of in the thing where we're making music for that occasion. Really, that's what it comes down to. Whether they've published it or not is another story.
You've got a few solos dotted out. I think I was listening to the trombone solo, Nothing But Thy Blood, the other day. Does it matter on the instrumentation of the request, or are you happy to do any kind of solo that you're asked to do? I mean, obviously, if you're asked to do a solo, it's a great privilege. But
yeah,
are you? Is there a preference to say, oh, I find it, a trombone is more natural to me than maybe a cornet or a horn or whatever? Is there a difference for you as a composer, arranger?
I have two answers to that question. First of all, I was taught by one of my composition teachers to write solos for the instruments that people don't write for. So my master's degree, I wrote a concerto for double bass.
Ooh,
and part of the psychology was that we need to learn for the instruments that we may not favor. So, if I ask kids in my orchestration classes, I'd say, what's your favorite instrument? They would say cello or French horn or something. Which one don't you like the most? Clarinet. And I would say, then you're going to write for the clarinet. It's the same thing that happened to me. I can't stand this instrument up close. As a section, yes. But, as close. But I learned to do that and taught me a lot about string writing and the kind of singers. So I started writing horn solos because there aren't that many. Mm-hmm. And at other times, like Nothing But Thy Blood, the idea was to write a high trombone solo. It was actually originally published as a horn solo because it was high. And I have never heard anybody do it on horn. It was intended for trombone. So, but basically, I don't favor one instrument or the other. I wrote a tuba concerto later, and I love the tuba. So it's just like, there's a time like at that moment, you just really love that instrument and you want to write well for it. Yeah. See what you can do. Yeah. So
I think it was Dorothy Getz and Sam Creamer. I both said that I think composers are falling into two camps. They're really kind of using this lockdown time to finish those compositions off and have the energy to do new ones. I think in about a year's time, the Salvation Army is going to be absolutely inundated with 100 compositions. And in 5 years' time, we're going to look back and say, now, why have you got this particular, why is there a whole stream of familiar things that you're not published a Christmas piece in June, but for some reason we just have the explosion. Oh yes, it's because we're all locked down, suffering from COVID, and all these ideas are generating. And one question that I was asked really, really recently that I hadn't thought of when I announced who's been mad enough to come into this conversation. Can you remember the first piece of music that you wrote that you were asked to conduct, and what was it like?
Wow.
I'm getting up and conducting a band is a learning process. Mm-hmm. But did you ever sort of get a piece of music? I think Jim Kerner said he had Bandmaster, right. And he said, right, you conduct it. So
Max Wood would make Bill and Jim actually get up and conduct their pieces. So they not only got criticized for the piece, they got criticized for the conducting, right, or lack of thereof, right? I don't really remember the first time I conducted. I don't. One of my pieces. I don't know. I'll tell you one of the things that did unnerve me. I had a cornet solo on Amazing Grace I did for an American Soloist album. And I was working. I used to work at the New York Temple, the Centennial Memorial Temple, at the piano on my way to school, which is a fantastic piano. And I was thinking it's 9-foot Steinway that Eric Leitzen played. And how inspirational was this, But
Eric Leitzen, wow.
The idea was that I was supposed to be practicing. The idea was I would play my horn as a staff band on the way to school every morning. But I began putting my cornet on the piano, and I'd start working, and then I'd start writing. And then one day, Derek Smith, the staff bandmaster, walked in and said, "What's this?" And I said, "Well, I'm working a little cornet solo." So that was frightening because here was Derek Smith playing my solo for the first time. And he did record it, actually. So that was kind of nice. But anyway.
Yeah. I think it's when you get some of these people come in and they go, "Hey, do you mind if I have a crack at this?" And you're like, "Well, yeah, I'm just sort of, jotting things out." I mean, you played Happy Day and Clear Skies, and nothing.
Right.
You played some of the most classic ones. You want to, but it's all a way of encouraging. Say you're a new voice. It's interesting. If we just keep playing the same solos, it's going to die. I mean, there's this wonderful story online of Albert Jakeway. I think it was at one of his profile nights, that he wrote a song of praise, and he said it sounded like a Luxembourg polka. And he said as soon as he said when it had been flogged to death, he said we just dropped it, and then of course it became popular again. Hang on a minute, that cornet sound, let's bring it out again. So, can you remember the movement from the playing bench to the conducting, to the rostrum to conduct a band? How did that happen? Was it a natural progression? Were you just invited to conduct music, or was it something you wanted to find out yourself?
Well, I really wanted to conduct, I think, kind of secretly, and I had some pretty good role models. I grew up with a older gentleman, he's passed on now, Bandmaster Straley. We called him Bandmaster. It's the only thing we called him. Bill Flynn led the Pendle Brass, which I was a member of as a kid. And I learned a lot from that, programming, promotion, all the things that Bill does very well. And then Ivor Vasenko came, and at that time, he approached me to take the core band. And I was commuting back from New York to do that. And that was really my first, it's kind of where I got my chops together as far as conducting, because it was week in and week out, 2 meetings, plus rehearsal, and all the preparation that went with it. So I didn't think twice about it. I was still playing in the New York staff band at the time, but I was conducting a core band. Yeah. So. Yeah.
Interesting, because obviously some people prefer to be behind. I'd rather play the music than conduct it, because you know what's in it, or you know what's coming up, and not everyone wants to conduct the band or is interested in it. And as someone who just plays on the percussion, it's not really something I've ever thought of wanting to do, even though the bandmaster found out a couple of years ago that band practice fell on a big birthday, and he said, let me guess, Morven, if you could play anything tonight, would it be Star Lake? I went, well, you know me too well, bandmaster. And there was this egging off, would you like to conduct? I said, I can do the percussion part with my eyes closed. I will just play the drum.
Okay.
But, one of the delights in this, I said to all the rest of them, is if there's a piece of music that I have to ask you about, Yvonne Field, I had to ask about Lord, If Your Presence Does Not Go With Us. Harold Burgmayer, please tell me the story behind Hemispheres, because every single time I listen to that epic work, I hear something new. I mean, that is for me, the ultimate kaleidoscope of Salvation Army melody. Did you have a mental breakdown after writing that? It is so intense and wonderful and colourful, and it's like chop, chop, change, and you don't even get a breath to go, hang on a minute, was that in the strength of the Lord or Amazing Grace? Could you please, for the love, just to satisfy my nerdiness?
So I got a call. Well, actually, while I was writing, I wrote a symphony for my doctorate, and I was working on the symphony, and I got a call, the worst timing possible, from Bandmaster Wicks Norris from New York. He said, Harold, we need to do a piece. We're going to Australia. We'd like to do a piece. And he obviously had been flying United or something, because he said, and the title will be Hemispheres, which is the magazine in the seat, right? And I began to think about it. And of course, the idea was that they were going to the Southern Hemisphere from the Northern Hemisphere. But 2 things struck me. And so the music is organized. And I'll say it in this way. First of all, that I wanted it to be, as your word is kaleidoscope, but as inclusive of the world as possible in terms of melodies and folk melodies. So I would be sitting at a baseball game and hear Hava Nakila and thought, oh, we got to put that in there. That'll take care, whatever. So I was collecting tunes from different things. But the piece is actually in 3 phases of kind of marching tunes. So the onward march of the Salvation Army. And actually, originally, I was going to call it Marching to Glory. So the old songs you'll hear are married with French songs or English songs. Then the later songs. And then like the Ivor was saying, I'll go in the strength of the Lord, those kind of later marching songs. So... And then the line that put it together was later, he's got the whole world in his hands, begins to show up a lot. Right. So, and the only one that I did a revision a couple of years ago where I took Graham Press's song March On out because no one knew it. But that gave me an opportunity actually to include more African melodies, because I was making a trip to Africa. I thought we got to have more African melodies. So there are more in there. So. Yeah. So the chairman at the time, the program secretary, eventually he was a commissioner, Colonel Moratz, used to say there are 84 references and we'll give somebody an album at the end of the concert if they can identify all of them. I don't think I could identify all of them, but I don't know.
Because that's going to be my next question. How many can you identify?
Well, I could identify them all, but I'll give you a story. At the time, Bob Green and Al Hansberger, they're both great E-flat tuba players. So I went to New York Staff Band rehearsal, not knowing that they're going to record this piece 2 months earlier than I thought. And Ron says, we've got some problems. And I had they had hired a copyist and I hadn't checked it, and there were like 80 mistakes. So I'm in rehearsal now trying to fix in front of people with great ears, New York Staff Band, notes. But we got to the part where I had done I'll Go in the Strength of the Lord in minor. Both these guys grew up in Philadelphia and were part of like the first weekend of the, Ivor Masenko introduced this melody. I said, don't you know what you're playing? I said, no, because it was in minor, they didn't recognize it. So, but I was trying to make a very Spanish sounding thing. So, it became very minor, right? So some people, even people who know the songs very well, might not even recognize them. But yeah, it was meant to be a montage, of many ideas kind of put together. And I'm very fond of the opening. I think the opening works really well. It's kind of slow, dramatic. The light of the world is Jesus. They shall come from the east and west. And it kind of culminates in they shall, in Christ there is no east or west, which is a great moment. So it took 6 months to do that piece, and I was away from my symphony way too long.
Oh.
It took a lot to get started, but it was kind of worth it. But they did do a pretty dramatic, that was the first big video production with actually video in it, not just slides, that the New York Staff Band did. And of course they took it on that tour. So, yeah.
I have to contact New York Staff Band, see if this video exists still.
Oh, I'm sure it does somewhere, yeah.
Absolutely. It's one of those songs and one of those tunes where you can just sit down and you learn something. From a composer point of view, because we've had several different unique answers, being as we have an international army and we're not restricted to, we can't buy the American Band Journal or the Noel Jones or the Arthur Gullidge series, virtually any band can buy Salvation Army music. Where's the most unusual place you've had an email from saying we played such and such a piece?
Well, actually, a couple of years ago, my father-in-law was Henry Garapi, and he would travel as the editor of our publications with Eva Burrows. And Eva Burrows was in Africa, and they put my transcription in the hornpipe, and he wrote me to say that. And I said, really? And, I went to Africa recently, to Congo, a couple of years ago, and they still talk about, they remember this performance. And I was like, really? You played Handel in a Congress, I don't know where they were, Zimbabwe, I think. And yeah, so that was for me a little unusual, yeah.
Is there a piece of your music that you get continual comments about? And people say, it's kind of, they say about this James, when a James Bond actor dies or played James Bond, plays Sherlock Holmes. I mean, your list of credentials speaks for itself. You're a very prolific writer and well-deserved. But is there a piece of music that is going to be kind of taken to your eventual role called Up Yonder? Harold Burgmayer wrote Dumph, even though he wrote so many other ones. Is there one that you're sort of aware has a particular appeal, whether you're fond of it or not?
I don't have a favorite like that. It's like I have 4 daughters. It's like asking my favorite daughter. I don't have a good answer for that. I mean, I mentioned Abide With Me before. I really think that expresses who I am. There's some pieces that just are what I am, and others are just kind of you doing your job and you just apply your craft to make it work. So my big piece, Curios, that I did for the Chicago Staff Band, I think also speaks. I think one of the things about Les Condon was he didn't stay too far away from the Easter story. And I feel we've been missing some of that. And so I felt pretty strongly about trying to do that. And I try to do that with that piece. And I think if you ask my band, they'd say, that's Harold. That's what he's trying to say, to try to express the gospel. We come from an atmosphere where the deputy bandmaster of the Chicago Staff Band, Peggy Thomas, never does a concert without an appeal or some kind of gospel message. So I'll say, well, we're presenting the gospel. Here it is, So how are we going to do that every concert is kind of a challenge. So that to me is who I am, and people know that.
Yeah. As you said, you've been in New York Staff Band, you've been in Pendle, you've been in Philadelphia, you're now in the Chicago Staff Band, but you're now the conductor and the bandmaster. Could be interpreted as a different leap. So, and also leaping into Bill Heinz's quite sizable shoes, was that something you were happy to do, or was that the challenge of, okay, because obviously you've known Bill for some time, and I've met him several times, and he is someone who you don't not make as a friend for life. So when the chance to become the Chicago Staff Bandmaster came up, how did you hear about it, and how did you, was it a kind of an interview process, or did he just say, right, you're doing it, I'm retiring June the 1st, you're doing it? How did it evolve?
So the story begins with his final Thanksgiving concert, which is the biggest concert of the year. Because it was history, I watched it online. and it was shown online. And I actually wrote him a letter the next day, and I said, Bill, I want you to know that, and it goes back to Jesus. I just, so almost every piece you did, I've conducted. I have to say, I think it was one I hadn't conducted. So I've experienced the piece as a conductor, just express appreciation for the music that he played that night. And basically, I said all that, and I put it aside. I never thought about the fact that he would be moving on. Like, I didn't think about it. And it comes to this is November, and it comes to about February, and my brother and another person that was living in our house at the time said, they just posted Bill Heinz's job in Chicago. And I said, whatever. I didn't even think about it, It comes to about the last week, and I'm going to walk with my wife, and I said, maybe I'll apply and see what happens. It's not that I was just enchanted with what I was doing. We had a wonderful program. I loved my kids, my program in Philadelphia, Eastern Pennsylvania, but I thought we'll do it. So they started with, to answer your question, there were 12 people got the first round. It went down to 6. 6 were like phone video interviews, and then 3 were flown in, over the course of that late May. And they basically had this timetable, like, we're going to let somebody know by the first week of June, and then we need you to be there for CMI as the guest. So the poster was like a mystery guest. Whoever was picked as the music secretary would be the guest for the music school that year. And that was me. So I worked beside Bill actually till the beginning of October, 2 months, and learned so much. I have all my life. I can remember writing to him, sending him pieces, and he would send me comments and so forth. So, yeah. And he's still helping us in a major way with the Hallelujah Choruses publications as an editor. And I'm still learning from that process, just watching him kind of rigorously holding to that. Yeah.
Was there a sense of continuation in that? Because you'd been in the New York staff band, you'd been in Fidel, and coming to the Chicago staff band. I've seen videos of the xylophone show and you egging him on to play it faster. It's a different style. Was that kind of part of your mantra to say, okay, if I'm bandmaster, obviously I'm following in the footsteps of a friend and a spiritual giant, but I've got to do the Harold Burgmayer thing, and I don't just want to continue doing it. It's got to be something different. Every bandmaster wants to sort of implant their own skills on the band and lead them in a different way. How do you handle that as a bandmaster of Chicago rather than New York or Philadelphia?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if I had taken the New York staff band, how that would go, because I would be more familiar. So I came to the way, and it was pretty much 38 years of the Bill Hines way. And I don't say that in a disparaging way. And I have to say, I was trying to follow that, not mess with it too much. I really was. But it was actually Bill's wife, Linda, who said to me, you need to be yourself.
Yeah.
And it began to be, I'm not going to apologize. For instance, I come from the East, the U.S., Midwest, are a lot more reserved. So the horsing around that I'm doing, they hadn't seen anything like that before. Mm-hmm. We would do that in the East.
Heinz, I find that incredible because.
Yes. So, I'm just saying, yeah.
Humor.
But the thing is, my thing is really, I want to connect with the people, with the congregation. And don't talk during my music. I'm going to keep you busy. So, the things that we can do to make that connection, be it through the lyrics, but being through actually activating and making contact with the congregation, that they're participating with us. And they began to love us for that because we were trying to make that connection. That's me. Yeah, it took me I'm going to take 2 years to kind of get over. I'm in my 5th season where I felt the band now was mine. But that was part of it, was like the approach to how we're trying to activate programs and make them work. So,
both as a player and as a bandmaster, Salvation Army music, who are the people that you enjoy seeing on the stage, whether they're with us or whether they're no longer with us? The music, that comes through that you want to get out the archive and give a blow, dust off occasionally, say, do you know what, this is a piece. Who are the names that sort of you enjoy seeing as a player and think, this is a well-constructed score here, this is going to be a joy to conduct this kind of thing? Who are the names that spring to mind for you?
Eric Lightson, for sure. And of course, I came from the USA East, where you didn't have a Starlight Finale or something without a piece by Eric Lightson. But that craft, that level of orchestration and craft, I don't know if we'll see it again. It's just so amazing, right? I mentioned Robert Redhead because, for instance, we did Corpus Christi about 2 or 3 seasons ago. There's something about that music that is a special time for the Salvation Army, those kind of things. So I think some of that works. And I would say my hero, believe it or not, you probably haven't heard this yet. Growing up was Eric Silverberg.
Lovely man.
Because it was
I only spoke to
accessible.
Niels a while ago.
Yes, I know you did, right. And so I wanted to write music that was that accessible, enjoyable for players to play, and also for audiences to receive. And so, for instance, his variations on St. Clement's. And of course, a lot of times we don't pay attention to the Triumph series, but we should, because there's some very, very fine music there. And that would be one example that I like to take in the summer to camps. And you could teach so much from those three variations, but so well crafted. But I like to surprise people with the Triumph series. Is what I tell them in the summer. So.
Yeah. So you have a particular kind of thing for devotional material, but I think a lot of composers I've spoken to say that it's the functionality. They like to write something that's functional. They're going to be used. An epic poem is all right for the Carnegie Hall Christmas Midsummer concert, but it's that opener at the second half of the interval to get people back to their seats that people click onto. Is that something you find works with the Chicago Staff Band? That if you're writing a 2-minute lollipop, as RSA used to call it, it's an effective kind of thing back, and that the composers that you were involved in and mentoring and you yourself, that it's a very simple thing of saying, okay, let's take this, make 2 minutes, that'll get the audience back, and you've got the tune at the heart of it. Is it something you're fond of doing, the sort of throwaway opener?
Yep. Because for two reasons. Let's say we end the first half with a major work, which we usually do. We do a lot of commercial, we take the intermission. We have to flip. The other thing is I feel that you have to use humor, lightness, things to set up maybe another major work. But if you don't do that, it's not going to work. So the way to kind of clear your brain for the congregation to like enjoy, we have a swing arrangement called Big Little Light by Bill Broughton. We've been using to come back. This just starts with the tubas. People eventually come back, shouts, and it's done, right? We'll have people come out of the band and play the jazz, right? That's just a whole different thing that they saw in the first half, which was more formal. And that says to people, well, I'm going to stick around for a little longer. This might be interesting. Yeah. And usually that's when we're doing the surprises, like the gallop you talked about on the xylophone, things like that.
Yeah. I find it interesting because obviously having that kind of I think it's a different thing to have rather than if you go into a brass band concert, you'll be expecting the cornet solo, the trombone, so maybe an ensemble quintet or combination. But I mean, I think it was Barry Gott, I said the one thing I was always wanted to know was the drum solo in Daniel, was that specifically written, or was that just kind of Norman Beercroft's Zimbabwe, where it was left open and anyone, come on, let's get on with it. So to actually have a dedicated instrument that's not a brass instrument in there, or let one of the brass players say, do you know what, I can play the tambourine with a horn, or, my bandmaster used to say one of his things was to get the euphonium player, sit him on the front, get the snare drum, and play the snare drum using the vibration over the euphonium bell. He said, because his wife said, oh, that's tapping away. He said, can you find a way of playing the drum without using sticks? It's all about creating a craft, isn't it? This is probably impossible to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Favorite Salvation Army song? Do you have one at the moment?
My Life Must Be Christ's Broken Bread, Albert Osborne.
Yeah, classic.
That's my in the moment.
Yes. Tomorrow morning it will change. You'll be something completely different. Yeah. If you could choose a musical hero, would it be? I mean, you've mentioned Eric Lightson, but is there anybody else who springs to mind that really stands out in your mind as someone you'd love to emulate in composing as well as playing?
Robert Redhead. Probably Robert Redhead.
Yeah, lovely man.
Partly because of his persona. He's quiet in rehearsal, yet there's such energy within that quietness, and it shows up in the music. So we can have very high energy. I don't know that he had a middle tempo. Things are very slow or very fiery and quick, but that's what I really like about him. And I think I'm a lot the same. So
I think I'm right in saying one of the retired officers at Ipswich was in training in the same session. He said whenever we went in the morning, Robert was always sitting at the piano tinkling and trying something. He said there was a restlessness. He couldn't wait to get on with life and do it. Apart from the consummation of the Chicago Staff Band and the music camps and your family and your call life, what else do you do with your time? What are the other passions in the Burgmayer life?
I'm a pretty avid reader. I read and read books. So I'm not working on music. I generally have a book in front of my face. I also like to walk every day, and I enjoy our yard. We work on our yard a lot, so yeah. Especially these days, we got a lot more time. So.
Well, our yard is a postage stamp side, so it's quite easy to do. And then some of your American ones are just, the size of a football pitch. Do you have a favourite passage of scripture that you have stuck in, like on the fridge magnet or whatever?
Psalm 27, verse 1. One thing have I desired, Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to inquire of the Lord. That just says everything. I just want to be, integrated into worship in the middle. I just love being in the middle of great music and worship. And that's kind of that verse encapsulates that for me. Yeah.
Well, I need to get on because the family was going to want their supper and I've got to do something about that.
Okay.
Harold Burgmayer, it has been an absolute privilege and pleasure to talk music, to finally meet you and just sort of head on the inspirations, the motivations, and to learn about Hemispheres, which was an absolute must for me because I love it so much. It's one of those wonderful pieces of music that never escapes me. I'm going to finish with a prayer and then I'll switch off the recording, but I just want to close this in prayer. As always, feel free to dance around the room, bury your head, or look at the Bible. It's entirely up to you. Dear Lord, the privilege of music is something that you have laid for us in the Bible. We praise you with the Psalms, we praise you with Ephesians, and there are so many classic moments of original compositional music, Lord, that it's impossible sometimes to pick one. But I want to pray especially today for Harold, for his music, his compositional gifts, his acceptance, Lord, that this was something that he could do and he could do for you, Lord. And that didn't stop him and worry him, that he followed your leading, Lord. He followed the mission that you had planned for him, and his family, his friends, his core folk, divisional folk, territorial folk, international leaders have all been an encouragement, a guide, and mentoring. We thank you, Lord, for all those moments where he feels stuck, Lord, and knows that you will unglue the process. And sometimes the answer just doesn't come, and he has to put something that he dearly wants to work out, knowing that it's got to be put aside for you to be able to bring the calmness into his life. So I pray and I thank you, Lord, for his compositions, his wonderful variety, his Christian witness, Lord, is so much at the center, Lord. And the fact that you are at the center of everything he does, and that when he's with his family and his friends and his pets and his relations, and he's striving to work out that tune on the piano or hum it when he's walking through the park, he knows you are with him and helping him and guide him. So I just pray for Harold. I pray that the Hemispheres will continue to grow. I pray that he will continue to feel that love and support so much. It's so relevant and so close and so needed, Lord. But I just pray for him right now and his family and ask you to bless him and continue to uphold him and strengthen him as only you can, and that he knows that the love of God will be there waiting for him. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
One postscript question that I always ask, I forgot and I apologize. What's in the pipeline? What's the next commission, original idea that's coming out of the Burgmayer compositional brain?
I'm working on an opener right now. Based on Nicaea, I think it's coming out pretty well, and kind of a very different, majestic thing. And then I'm working on a devotional piece. Only in this crisis, it's basically on turn your eyes upon Jesus. I know it's been used a lot, but something strikes me about the look and live and the verse, some of those words. So those are the two that kind of in my brain right now. So,
well, thank you. Harold Burgmayer, thank you very much.